Xiu Xiu have been one of the most eclectic and unpredictable musical acts of the last 2 decades. They are spearheaded by vocalist, multi-instrumentalist, and songwriter Jamie Stewart. He is pretty much the figurehead of the band. He's the only one who's been in it during their entire career. Other members have included Carolee McElroy, Angela Seo, and Thor Harris. Over the course of their 14 studio albums and many side projects, they've dipped their toes into so many different musical styles and sounds and influences that whenever you get something new from Xiu Xiu, you really have no idea what you're gonna get. I really think they've been one of the most versatile musical acts of the century. Just a little disclaimer here before I start ranking their discography. Xiu Xiu are one of my favorite bands of all time. I have one of their albums as a 7 out of 10, and every single other one is at least an 8 or higher. So if you see an album near the bottom of the list, it does not mean that I do not love it. All it means is I love the other albums more. So if you see one of your favorites near the bottom, don't be like, oh my god, how can you not love that one? Trust me, I do. I just love all their stuff so much, and this is just my personal ranking anyways. Now, kicking things off at number 14, I have Women as Lovers. The reason this is the one Xiu Xiu album that I can't fully get behind is I feel that a lot of these songs only feel half finished or half composed. They're just very loose feeling, and they don't always feel like they come together to create a cohesive final piece. Some of them are even too short, you know, they're only barely over 2 minutes, and with just all these ideas just flowing around throughout that time, they really never form anything concrete in my opinion. There's often songs that you just can't really latch on to anything within them. Now, this album does have one of their most expansive, naturalistic sound palettes to date. You have flutes, saxophones, horns, bells, xylophones, super crisp drums that I love across a lot of these songs, and the way that they're used, you know, every single song, it's like they try to throw all these bells and whistles at you, and sometimes they stick, but other times it's like they're just trying to put as much random sonic detours into these tracks as possible to keep you entertained. And I guess in a sense it is. You know, the first time I listened to this, I thought, wow, this is going to be one of my favorite projects from Xiu Xiu, but the more I listened, the more I just struggled to really grasp on to what they were doing compositionally. With a lot of these, as I said, they just feel very loose, and I couldn't get a full grasp, especially on some of the songs at the back end, like Puffin' Bunny and White Nerd. There's also some weird musical choices on here that I don't know if they always fully land, like on Child at Arms, that weird whistling that is used prominently throughout the instrumental. I mean, it's kind of cool how they use it, but it also is a bit grating at the same time, so that's one I'm very conflicted on. I also find this is their most uninteresting record lyrically. The only 2 tracks on here I really pull much from are Guantanamo Canto, which speaks on the horrific torture abuses done by the US government in Guantanamo Bay, and then also Black Keyboard, which speaks horrifically on the abuse that a mother is performing onto her son, you know, very vivid, disgusting sexual abuse. But that is what you have to expect from Xiu Xiu's lyrics, honestly. They just delve into the darkest, deepest, most twisted parts of human nature, and they explore that all throughout their discography. They're definitely not for the faint of heart. But then pretty much every other track on here just feels like random, not very descriptive sentences thrown together. You know, you have albums like Girl with Basket of Fruit, where there's not necessarily coherent song topics as a whole, but there's just this really twisted, vivid imagery, and you feel like you're just entering the mind of this insane, twisted person. You know, it really conjures up a lot in that sense, but this, a lot of the writing I just find to be very flat, and it doesn't really evoke anything from me in any sense. At 13, I have Dear God, I Hate Myself, and it's at this point where I realize if this is your 13th best album, you must be a hell of a group in my opinion, because this is still a great project. The reason why I have it so low is I find stylistically, it just doesn't have the same unique flair that a lot of the other records have that they carry throughout. You know, they all have that one unique musical factor that just carries them and that is distinct to that album only, whereas this one, you know, it's just some really traditional art pop in my opinion, and it really relies on great songwriting to stand out above the fray, and it definitely does that on the majority of this thing. Songs like Grey Death, Chocolate Makes You Happy, Falkland Road, House Sparrow, you know, you're gonna get those stuck in your head. They're great tunes with some great lyrics on them as well. There's also some creative behind the scenes elements going on here, because even if they don't sound that out of the ordinary, the songs Secret Motel, the title track, and Apple Brain were actually entirely produced on a Nintendo DS, because that's just Jamie Stewart for you. He'll just go out of his way to do the most bizarre things possible, and for being made on a Nintendo DS, those songs sound pretty fantastic. Now, Apple Brain to me is one of the weaker songs in Xiu Xiu's discography, because lyrically, it's like this South Park tribute. You know, there's really nothing actually meaty going on there. It's just this kind of fun-er song, and the sound palette on it is slightly boring. That's the one that once you hear it was done on a DS, it actually kind of makes sense, just because it's one of the weaker songs in their discography in my opinion. You know, the synths just feel kind of flat. It's not that dense. There's not much going on. It's just, you know, the melody is kind of catchy. I guess Jamie's kind of good on it, but it's a really forgettable song in the larger context of their discography. But the other 2 are actually really impressive, the fact that he did them on a DS, especially Dear God, I Hate Myself. You know, the drum programming on that one is super complex. The synths are pretty monstrous and actually have a really cool texture to them as as well. And I also love the lyrics on that song. You know, they're just kind of absurd. The part where he says, "I'll always be nicer to the cat than I am to you, you, you." You know, there's plenty of ridiculous lyrical moments like that throughout the album, and some more serious ones too, like Falkland Road, which details the tragic story of young girls in poorer countries who are just murdered and sexually abused. So overall, this just feels like a collection of really good songs, more so than a great unified whole, which I feel like pretty much all Xiu Xiu's other albums do. But that's really not that much of a problem because, as I said, I still love pretty much everything on here. I guess a few songs like Cumberland Gap are maybe just a bit underwhelming in approach. You know, that's just them doing a rendition of a classic folk song, and it's nice in the context of the album, and it's pretty short, so it's not actually a detractor or anything. I do find it pleasant, but it's not one that you're going to go return to or anything. So overall, you know, this is just an album where you rely on the strength of the individual songs more than anything. At number 12, I have Knife Play, and I feel like this is going to be my most controversial pick because I feel like this is one of their most loved projects. I think for a lot of people, this would be top 3 or at least top 5. But for me, I just think that a lot of the stuff they did on here, they just went on to execute better on their later projects. While this album does contain some of their best noise pop songs like Don Diasco and Homunculus, where I especially love the bit where Jamie matches his voice to the melody in the production, it is super haunting and chilling in this really bizarre way. But there's also songs like Over and Popo, which I do still like, don't get me wrong, but I just feel that's a style that they've done much better and more consistently on other projects. And then the only other thing on here that really drags it down for me in comparison to their other projects is the closing song, Tonight and Today. This is a very specific brand of Xiu Xiu song that if you're familiar with the group's discography, you'll kind of know what I mean. Songs like Fast Car, Fabulous Muscles, Black Keyboard, Black Drum Machine, Wigmaster, Petite, Normal Love. These songs where it's pretty much just one minimalistic instrument that is playing the entire time, very sparse and sparingly, as Jamie Stewart just has these really reserved yet haunting vocal performances over them. They're always some of the bleakest of the records they're on, and there's just something about the sparsely played instruments and Jamie's very haunting, untraditional vocals that just creates this super unnerving feeling on them. And basically where I'm going with this is, as far as those songs go, Tonight and Today is probably the weakest in my opinion of their entire discography. The piano is just so sparse to the point where there are moments where it's just like absolute silence, and I don't find the lyrics on this one particularly engaging. Don't get me wrong, I still do like this song, but just especially as a closer, it is a little more underwhelming than I would have liked it to be. And they've just, as I said, they've done songs like this way more effectively on their other projects. So just in comparison, when I look at Knife Play, that would be why it falls closer to the bottom for me. But there's still so much great music on this thing as well. I love the frantic, panicked I Broke Up. Suha is super devastating. I love the saxophone on that one, how it just captures the really melancholic emotions he's displaying in this story of a woman who really has just nothing left to live for. And as this is their debut, this album introduces you to a lot of stuff that has become a staple of Xiu Xiu's music, most notably in my opinion the fact that Jamie is such an empathetic songwriter. One of the key things that is like really unique to Xiu Xiu in my opinion is how he just takes people that he knows and their stories, and he'll write songs about them or from their perspective. You know, he really likes to live in other people's shoes throughout their entire discography. That's something that you get so much of, and that is one of the big things I love about them. You're just exploring all these different types of people from all these different facets of life. Often it's the people in society who are often forgotten about, and Jamie, he just loves to kind of enter their world and write songs for them, about them, you know, from their perspective, as I said, and it's just really fascinating. He does that on here with songs like Luber and Andong. At number 11, I have Forget. I feel like this might be Xiu Xiu's most accessible record today. A lot of the stuff on here is just straight synth pop, and even like the crazy it gets, it's just industrial synth pop pretty much. At least for me, this was one of the easiest albums for them to just get into right away, get really invested in the tunes and the melodies that were being played. Jamie is at some of his most melodic on some of these songs, like Wondering. And as far as this style of music goes, this is a pretty standout album to me just because they bring a lot of really interesting synth textures and synth tones on songs, especially like Queen of the Losers, Hey Choco Bananas, or the title track. I mean, those gargantuan electronic notes that play as Jamie is shrieking "Forget" on the title track, like that stuff is just all encompassing. It's super fascinating. It sounds a lot more interesting than just, you know, your typical synth work on music like this. This album also features one of their most epic and soaring songs to date, that being Get Up. The way that song builds throughout and then just unleashes at the end is one of the most euphoric things in their entire discography. I will also say that lyrically, as a whole, this is one of their most cohesive projects. You know, it sticks to a very particular theme throughout the entire thing, and that would be the theme of sex work and sex trafficking. He explores that in all types of different manners in a very empathetic way, as I just mentioned with the last album. And, you know, especially the last few songs on here, Forget, Petite, and Faith Torn Apart, they were all inspired by this sex trafficking website that Jamie had stumbled onto, and that was run in his neighborhood, so it was very close to home from him. And on the last song, there's that really chilling poem where where you're hearing all these descriptions of these different women that, you know, if you look into the making of this album, it's just different pictures of girls that Jamie found on that site, all these underage girls who, you know, were being trafficked, and it's, you know, pretty disturbing and harrowing, but he does it in such a incredibly powerful way, in my opinion, which makes this album great. And this is really the point of the list where if I'm going to tell you why this album is on the lower end of things, I really almost don't know what to say. I guess the intro song, The Call, just has some more traditional sounding synth work. You know, I don't find the lyrics on that one particularly interesting. Jamie himself is not giving one of his more outlandish vocal performances. It's a more reserved song, you know, it kind of has a cool groove going on. I still really like the song a lot, but I guess just because that one isn't as incredible as the rest, like it falls lower overall, I don't know, it's kind of weird to say. So at this point, you're just gonna have to take it as the ranking is based on my personal enjoyment, but clearly I love pretty much everything going on at this point, and it's just, yeah, a weird situation to be in for a ranking video. At number 10, I have Foret. I think that musically, this might be the most beautiful sounding album in Xiu Xiu's discography. You just have a lot of really rich, sprawling, kind of lush compositions on here. Songs like Clover or Rose of Sharon or Baby Captain, you know, they really take their time to just expand and flourish, and you know, they throw in all these cool, really rich, dense instruments in there. You know, you've got these really warm strings throughout, these great acoustic guitars, you know, these really beautiful xylophones that'll come in, just a lot of stuff that they bring in very methodically and in a well-paced manner, and they just create these really cool and, as I said, sprawling compositions out of them. Whether it be the graceful woodwinds on Ale or the really comforting drums on the end of Mousy Toy, or on Rose of Sharon, how Jamie just progressively stretches his voice further and further until at the end he just sounds so insanely impassioned that, you know, it's hard not to connect to it. There's just so many super delicious, tasty moments on this album that you really savor when they come around. I mean, even a song like Muppet Face, it's probably one of the noisiest and most overwhelming and all-encompassing songs that Xiu Xiu have ever made, and yet it's still extremely beautiful. Like when you get to like the peak of this song or the climax, it just sounds like a super beautiful, you know, ambient drone type of song, even though it is very loud and, as I said, a little bit harsh, but in the most beautiful, serene way possible. The only song on here that I don't think fits that mold of just being a display of pretty much pure beauty would have to be Saturn, which is just a brutal, disturbing takedown of then President George W. Bush. This album honestly could have made it to the top 5 for me, but the reason it falls a bit lower is I feel like with the last 2 songs, the album kind of dies off a bit. They're still really good tracks, but I just find they're a little more reserved, a little more low-key, not as much engaging things happening compositionally within them, but lyrically they're still super good, especially track 10. It's like this weird tale of like a baby getting kidnapped by a witch or something along those lines, some strange fantasy type stuff. So there's still cool stuff going on within those songs. I just do feel like it is a weaker ending to what an album that has a very strong start. At 9, I have Xiu Xiu Plays the Music of Twin Peaks, and this was honestly like the most perfect score or soundtrack that Xiu Xiu really could have ever covered. It matches the really freaky, outlandish, haunting style just perfectly, and they really wring every last ounce of the, you know, the most disturbing and mysterious and creepy parts of this score just out of the music. You know, I went back and listened to the original score because I had never heard it, honestly. I've never seen the show, just to see how Xiu Xiu changed things up, and really all they did was they just made it even more bizarre and creepy. They made it a little more noisy at times, where some of the original tracks were a little more reserved, but everything they did, every choice they made on here, it fit their style perfectly, and they just enhanced or at least changed the original in a way where they just made it their own. And they're able to bring out that really twisted, mutant, bizarro feeling while also making this, I think, one of their most accessible projects, because, you know, on songs like track 2 and Falling, Jamie's vocals are some of the most beautiful and melodic that they have ever been. You know, it's not his more, you know, warbly or just random or vocals that he does sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, it actually, he sounds like Perfume Genius, honestly, on a few of these songs. In terms of the production quality on here, everything sounds immaculate. The guitars are super rich and soaring at points on songs like Blue Frank and Falling. You know, you have these really kind of mysterious, really smooth, whole sounding xylophones and vibraphones. You have that beautiful, lush, iconic piano line from Laura Palmer's theme, which Xiu Xiu accentuates with some harsher, noisier elements. And can I just say that Xiu Xiu's rendition of Falling might be the most gorgeous and beautiful thing that they have ever recorded. I mean, this song just builds such a graceful, spacey, blooming atmosphere that just washes all around you with the gorgeous synth chords on this song. Jamie's vocals on this thing are some of the most emotionally resonant he has ever performed. They're simultaneously super fragile and impassioned. This song just has this soaring, larger-than-life feel. You feel like you're just floating above the clouds and just at the end of like this epic journey. The melodies and main composition they already had to work with here just create such a wistful, longing feeling, and they just did everything they could with it to just make it, as I said, the most beautiful thing I think they've ever done. At number 8, I have Unclouded Sky. This is their most under-the-radar project, I think, by far. It's the only one of their albums that doesn't have a Wikipedia page or anything. It has by far the least amount of ratings on Rate Your Music. I wasn't following Xiu Xiu around the time of this album's release, so I wasn't there to witness it myself, but from what I understand, the release was a little more complicated. Like, this album wasn't so much front and center. I think it was maybe a bit poorly promoted or something. It just didn't get all the attention that a usual Xiu Xiu release would probably garner. And it's also really not a usual Xiu Xiu release. Like, the direction that Jamie went on this one is just really bizarre, like such a bizarre choice. It's really not at all what I expected going into this. You know, I know Xiu Xiu is always changing things up and doing weird, crazy stuff all the time, so like I almost always, you know, don't know what I'm getting. But like once I hear it, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's a Xiu Xiu project. But this is just something totally different, totally just out of the blue for them. What Jamie did with this one is essentially what he has is he's taken these Christian spirituals, like these really classic, old, traditional Christian spiritual folk songs, and he is just, it's just him, his guitar, he's just playing those over these field recordings he took that are just full of these really calming nature sounds. You know, you have birds chirping, all sorts of other animals, you know, a little bit of wind blowing here or there. Occasionally you'll hear like a car pass by or like some chatter in the background, but it's all very calming, it's all very serene. And he takes those recordings and they underscore the entire album, as well as these very faint drones, and both of those, they just create the foundation for this thing, and they just create this very meditative headspace. And then, as I said, Jamie comes on top of these and performs these traditional spirituals, and the end result is this very strangely alluring and meditative project where every time I listen to it, I just need to sit down and just zone out. You know, I love going off somewhere and just like, you know, sitting down by a lake or something, or just down in the middle of a field and just closing my eyes and listening to this. And when I'm listening to this, like, it just gives me this sensation that I'm, you know, peacefully dying in the middle of a forest or something along those lines. And you might be thinking like, how the hell is that enjoyable? But like, as I said, peacefully dying, you know what I mean? Like, it just feels like my soul is just escaping my body and just flying off somewhere else. And it is very low key, you know, instrumentally, as I said, it really is just those faint drones and, you know, Jamie's acoustic guitar playing. And, you know, his vocals on this range from being more traditional to being more outlandish at the perfect points. And it's just this weird culmination of things, and it just creates this entire experience that for me, I find to be super serene and peaceful and moving in a way, you know. And if you're thinking like, oh, Christian spirituals, you know, I'm not religious, will I really get much out of them? I'm like the least religious person you'll find, and this album still speaks to me in a way and still gives me a very spiritual experience when I listen to it. So yeah, this is one that a lot of people, you know, haven't heard. It gets overlooked. I feel like it's underappreciated by people who have heard it, and it's one that I guarantee like a lot of people will just find extremely, extremely boring. But for me personally, it hits very hard. You know, when I kind of take this in the same way that I do an ambient project. You know, I just zone out to it. I just let it take me away, and in that sense, I just find it gorgeous and extremely peaceful and moving. Starting off the top half here at number 7, I have the Air Force. Now, I feel like this is Xiu Xiu's most cluttered and eclectic and least cohesive release, you know, as a full body of work. But something about that actually adds a lot of charm to this. You know, that is not a negative at all for me. I actually really like how that plays out, how you just kind of really don't know where you're going. Like, navigating this thing, it's an album that I really had to listen to like 6, 7, 8 times to get a full grasp on every song here, and just the way the album flows. You know, it's very start-stop. It's very, you know, the mood jumping all over the place. But there's a very unique charm to the way it does it in particular. You know, it doesn't feel that in a way where it's distracting, where it's like, oh, I really don't know, you know, what to grab onto, because each of the individual songs is great. So when I say I had to listen to it multiple times to get a sense of it as a whole, I don't mean I was not enjoying it those first listens. The individual songs are so good that I absolutely was, but just like to take this in as a whole, I just felt I really had to sit with it, give it some time, and then kind of understand what it was doing. It starts off with Buzzsaw, which just has these weird plunky piano and drum hits, and Jamie delivering a really beautifully raw vocal performance over it. You know, there are some melodies that he has on this song that just like particularly hit hard for me. Boy Soprano, Vulture Piano, and Save Me, Save Me are all some of the most immediate and catchy songs in Xiu Xiu's catalog. I love that guitar riff on the chorus of Boy Soprano. Vulture Piano has this weird thing going on with like these flutes and drums that kind of work together in this weird way that I don't know how it works the way it does, but it somehow comes together to create this really punchy and hard-hitting song. And Save Me is like a top 5 Xiu Xiu song for me. I love the way that the guitars and strings come together on this one, the way they just kind of dance with each other, just create this really elegantly beautiful instrumental, and it's just like a 2.5-minute super catchy track as well. And then thrown amidst these, you just have these songs like PJ in the Streets, which is this warm, glowing ambient track, or like Bishop California, which is this gargantuan, monstrous, epic kind of noisier song, which even within itself, like that starts off with this really like sparse guitar thing, and then it just kind of blows up into this explosive spectacle that almost feels like it comes out of nowhere, but that's actually kind of fitting as the song is talking about this mining town in California, and it's talking about disasters that happen in those mines, which could include a random explosion. And there's also the pineapple versus the watermelon, I think it's called, which just has this really gorgeous plucked guitar line that I really love. Like the melody on that one, it just always soothes me very much. At number 6, I have Angel Guts Red Classroom. Compositionally, this is one of their most simple projects, just in terms of the fact that they only used analog synths, a drum machine, and then actual drums. I'm not saying that the compositions themselves are that simple, because of course they'll take those 3 things and they'll layer them in all these insane, crazy ways on a lot of these tracks. So it's not like you're just getting, you know, these very basically composed songs on here, but I'm just saying in terms of the approach to this, it was definitely a lot simpler. But the way they utilize it, to me, is extremely effective, just because like the synths on here are they're just so dark and hellish at points. Like there's some songs on here that really just feel pitch black, you know, like Archie's Fades or Stupid in the Dark. And that dark, hellish sound that they kind of create with this one is super fitting for the subject matter at hand, because this whole album is just about sexual perversion. It just deeps into the weirdest, creepiest, darkest parts of, you know, sexual fantasies and desire, and it just explores them in really, you know, vivid, harrowing, and sinister ways. I mean, you take songs like Cynthia's Unisex, which is about a guy watching his wife engaged in a threesome with 2 other men, and just, you know, hearing that song from his point of view, where he's so conflicted. He keeps saying how beautiful his wife looks, and, you know, he keeps screaming, no, 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 but then the more he watches it, the more he himself gets into it, and it's just an extremely twisted and warped story that, you know, will leave you sort of mortified, as a lot of Xiu Xiu's music does, and that type of content is all over this record. But yeah, they just do it in such an effectively creepy way that I just can't help but be enthralled by this record every time I hear it. The only point on this album where the subject matter shifts away from that a little bit, because at the end of the day it's still kind of related, are the songs El Naco and New Life Immigration, which come back to back and are kind of tell this story of a double suicide committed by 2 lovers. Now, you really don't have to do that much legwork to relate this back to the themes of sexual perversion, but this is a distinct part of the record that kind of stands out on its own a bit to me. On the first part of things, with New Life Immigration, you kind of just get this more reserved, melancholic song, which just, it shows these 2 people who are just, they've had it with life, and really all they have is each other, and they're both going to go out of this world together, and it describes it in a more beautiful way. Obviously, it's still very disturbing what's happening here, but these 2 people, you know, they seem to be at peace with what they're about to do, you know, and they're describing how, if to them the world's pretty much come to an end, they're just done with it, but they have each other, and that's great, and the fact that they're going out of the world together is really all that they could ask for. But then you get to the second half of things, El Naco, which it really shows the brutality of the situation. You know, they're describing blood all over their laps. They're just describing this scene in the most horrifying manner possible, and you also get these shrieked vocals from Jamie, and you get like these like hellish church bells in the background as it's happening, and the entire thing is just this vividly horrifying experience that really shows you the true brutality of the situation. I feel like New Life Immigration is more so the fantasy of how this scenario would play out, and then El Naco is really the brutal reality of it all. And also, despite how fucked up this album is and how interesting it is to take in as a whole, it also contains some of their punchiest and most direct songs to date. As I already mentioned, Stupid in the Dark, Archie's Fades, you know, Cynthia's Unisex, and then also songs like Botanica de Los Angeles, Adult Friends, and The Silver Platter, all songs that just on their own immediately kind of grab you with their super dark, hard-hitting synths and drums. And Jamie vocally on this project is often at his most wild and freakish. I mean, on the song A Knife in the Sun, they kind of sample these really yelpy, warbly, weird, horrifying vocals that he does, where he's going like, "Aah!" but in a much louder, harsher, freakier way. You know, I could not replicate it for the life of me, and they kind of use those as like these synth notes, you know, within it, like they're sampling his voice doing that multiple times, and it's just, when you're hearing it, it's just like, ringing around your head, and it's utterly terrifying, but it's also super effective, and I love it. Starting off the top 5, I have maybe their most divisive album to date, and that would be Nina. And now they have plenty of divisive work all throughout their catalog, but this one in particular, like everyone I know who's listened to this, I've either heard them say it's great or that it's horrible. And frankly, that's perfectly understandable, because what Jamie did on here is that he took classic Nina Simone songs, or songs that have been iconically performed by Nina Simone, you know, not always originals by her, and he just took them and he just fucked them to high hell. Like, there's almost no resemblance between the original songs and what you're getting on here, whereas Nina's performing these really smooth, graceful, beautiful R&B songs with, you know, these super incredible, soaring, passionate vocals. You know, she's one of the best vocalists probably of all time. Jamie instead takes those and he just has these really freakish, frantic, weird, squeaky, blaring, just insane avant jazz tracks where vocally he's just doing some of the weirdest shit he has ever done. And I mean, obviously Jamie has never been someone who you'd expect to like properly cover a Nina Simone song, just in the sense that, you know, he's not like an incredible Adele type vocalist or, you know, Marvin Gaye. That's not what he is. He has a very unique, as I've mentioned plenty of times throughout this, like very haunting, very weird, bizarre vocal style that is very unique to him, but also like wouldn't play well off the ears of just your average listener. And here he's just taking all his weirdness to like the next level. Like for most of this album, he's like super reserved and kind of raspy, and he honestly sounds like he's just speaking from like the pits of hell on a lot of these songs, like especially on the first track, like Don't Smoke in Bed. Like he just sounds like a fucking demon on that thing, and it's like totally like it's like the Antichrist to what Nina Simone was doing on a lot of these songs. Like if you're just a Nina Simone fan and you came to check out some nice Nina Simone covers, you're gonna be fucking scared away by whatever the hell it is that Jamie is doing on this. But taking all that into consideration, I absolutely love what he did with these tracks. Everything about how bastardized his vocals are across this project absolutely works for me, especially because one of my favorite things about this project is how they really ring out all the darkness that is in the lyrics of these original songs. Like if you listen to these songs as performed by Nina, you know, you'll catch on to the themes that are a bit sadder or a bit darker, but like Jamie takes them and he really just puts that front and center, you know, on songs like Pirate Jenny, For Women, Don't Explain, Where Can I Go Without You, The Other Woman. Like the lyrics on these songs are just genuinely sad or dark, and Jamie really puts that front and center. Like he is taking songs that, as I said, might sound even kind of cheery, but just lyrically will have a sad theme, and he's really like being like, nah, this is fucked up. Like you're gonna feel how fucked up this is. And then instrumentally, this is just the type of jazz that I personally like really love. It's just super outlandish and improvised, and it's kind of jumping all over the place, feels super scattered and random, and yet like the instruments sound so lush and beautiful at the same time. It just creates this absolutely, as I've said, frantic pace about the album that I love. At number 4, I have their newest release, Girl with Basket of Fruit, and somehow, this deep into their career, I honestly think that this is their most psychopathic project to date. Lyrically, this thing seems almost completely removed from Jamie himself, and it feels like instead that he has just entered the mind of the absolute most twisted and insane people on earth. You know, I'm talking serial killers, I'm talking just the most twisted individuals who are just like, you know, should not be a part of society. And not because they weren't once humans who deserved empathy themselves, it's just that they're people who have gone so far down the rabbit hole that they're just unsalvageable. Like, look at the lyrics of any song on this project and you'll understand what I mean. It is just some of the most bizarre, twisted, vividly strange imagery that I have ever heard, and I absolutely love everything about it. You know, it's just so outlandish and ridiculous. Some of the first times you'll hear it, you can't help but laugh. And it's very much stuff that is not funny. It's just like, holy hell, what the actual fuck am I listening to? And also, when I say I'm laughing at them, I don't mean I'm laughing because it's like so bad that it's good or something. No, I mean like it's genuinely so terrifying that I have no other reaction but to go, ha ha ha, you know, at some of the things said on here. And then other things just hold so much weight and seriousness to them, like the song Mary Turner, Mary Turner. Like, if you laugh at that, you're fucking sick as shit. Like, I don't, you know what I mean, if you'll hear it. Because that song is about, like, the lynching of a black woman from, I think, like, the 20s or 30s back in the day. It's about a true story, and just, it is so descriptive in a manner where, like, it is so hard to listen to, because you're just hearing about the lynching of this real life woman who was pregnant at the time, and just the description of what is happening to her and her unborn child. It is it is one of the most disturbing things that I have ever heard. And musically, this thing is just as confusingly abstract. I mean, the title track has these weird, glitchy drum patterns, but I've never really heard anything like this. Same with the song Scissors. The song Ice Cream Truck crawls around my ears like some deranged spider creature, and Pumpkin Attack on Mommy and Daddy just sounds like a club anthem from the pits of hell. It sounds like if Sophie got possessed by a demon. And I find Jamie really switched up how he performed his vocals on this. I wouldn't quite call them spoken word, but they're very non-melodic. You know, often they're just shrieks or howls or something along those lines. Other times I don't even know how to describe them. I guess you'd call them a spoken word, but it's really just like these, as I've said, like insane ramblings from the mind of an extremely deranged person. At number 3, I have Always. Now, the way that I describe Dear God, I Hate Myself, just in terms of it feeling more like a collection of songs rather than having an overall sound or theme or concept or anything like that, I kind of honestly feel the same about Always. But the only thing is, I feel like everything about that approach was done so much exponentially better on this one. Now, obviously, I love both albums, but just Always, to me, the songwriting is far stronger. Like, the actual instrumentals are far more dense and detailed and intricate, and just like subtly progress in really fascinating and engaging ways. And I think that the actual instrumental palette that is on display here just sounds a lot cooler, you know, on songs like High or Gulmudin or Born to Suffer. Like, the synths on those, they sound really fantastic, like the rich, lush pianos on the Oldness, along with those kind of faint, glowing backing vocals. Like, there's just so much in terms of what they're working with the sound palette on here that just does a lot more for me. So pretty much, like, this album was the album that came out after Dear God, I Hate Myself, and I pretty much just think that they, you know, started off like doing this style with Dear God, I Hate Myself, and then just refined it in every way possible for Always. On a songwriting level, this project displays that part about Jamie that I was describing earlier that I love so much, how he really enters people's worlds and just writes songs about all these people from all these different facets of life. Pretty much every song on here is him doing that to some extent or another. Joey's song is about Jamie's brother going through hardships and abuse in his marriage. I Love Abortion is about his friend who had to make the hard decision of, you know, clearly getting an abortion. Gulmudin is about this Afghani boy who was murdered by the US military. He was innocent. It was just done for sport, and it's just him mourning that fact. Born to Suffer was written for the people of Haiti after they suffered their earthquake. Chimneys of Fire is about one of their former band members who attempted to kill himself while on tour. Factory Girl is about people in factories overseas who are forced to work these grueling, brutal jobs in horrible conditions for super low wages and who are just treated horribly by the people who employ them. Like, he just takes these very tragic, heartbreaking situations, writes very empathetic and personable songs about them, and allows you to see the world that these people encompass. I just love how he allows you to explore these various parts of humanity that are rarely ever shown, that you're rarely ever exposed to, or that, you know, you might hear about, but, you know, not firsthand. And obviously this isn't firsthand, but it's usually from people Jamie knows. It's usually something Jamie has looked into, stories he knows about, and he really gives you a broader look at things. And it's not just in a way where he's just kind of handing you out information. As I said, he really dives in, he becomes these characters, or really just looks at them in a way where it's like he's almost best friends with them, and he just sings about it in such beautiful, passionate, poetic ways. Now we're at my number 2 pick, which means I'm also about to give away my number 1, but either way, in second place, I have Fabulous Muscles. Now, this entire album revolves around the very serious and weighty topic of abuse, and abuse in all its forms, you know, physical, mental, sexual, even abuse of power on songs like Support Our Troops Oh. And so I'm sure you can tell just based off that this isn't an easy listen by any means. There are multiple moments on this that are just have me on the brink of tears because it is just so tragic what is going on here. But this is a topic that is very personal to Jamie. It's something that he has experienced. It's something that so many people in his life have experienced. It's something that he's constantly seen around him his entire life. So I feel like this project for him is something that was very cathartic to make, just to put it all out there. And I mean, yeah, because of that, it is one of the most powerful and harrowing albums that I've ever heard. And what I find really interesting about this album is that despite the subject matter at hand, this is one of their warmest and most beautiful sounding records, just in musically. You still get your harsher moments here or there, like on I Love the Valley Oh with Jamie's random shrieked vocals, or like on Support the Troops Oh, where you have those harsher, noisier elements meant to represent kind of the chaos of war. But I mean, Clown Town just has these beautiful glistening synths. The title track is just this super warm acoustic guitar. You have Crankheart, which has this kind of 8-bit type synth melody that just sounds like a super catchy synth pop song. Bunny Gamer has those warm saxophones. I Love the Valio has one of their most straightforward and yet heartbreaking guitar riffs. And yet the more pretty sounding musical elements of this do not at all detract from what is happening lyrically. In fact, if anything, they just accentuate it, because just the warmness of the album it kind of just brings you in a way where it just becomes super intimate, and now you're just being placed directly in front of Jamie as he just recounts to you these harrowing tales of things that he and other people have experienced. I mean, when you listen to a song like Fabulous Muscles, where he just describes this sexual abuse at the hands of a parent or uncle, or clearly someone who is older than him, or with Brian the Vampire, where he's describing this little kid who is just abused by his brother. I mean, and when you're listening to songs like that, it's hard not to cry at them for me, because it is just so tragic what is going on, and he is just communicating it in the most personal and heart-wrenching ways possible. And he really pulls no punches with anything he's doing on here. Like, it's all just super blunt, brutal, and visceral. Like, it's just, he's not hiding anything here. It's just all out on the table, and taking it in, it is a powerful listen. But my favorite Xiu Xiu album, as you probably have already deducted, is A Promise. I think this may be the most effectively on-edge album that I have ever heard. Everything about this album, it just feels like it's walking the line on the brink of insanity. Now, this album was recorded after Jamie Stewart's father committed suicide. That is very apparent in a lot of the lyrics on here too, but just the way that Jamie's overall mind state is depicted musically on this project is absolutely brilliant to me. As I said, this record is just so on edge, and the way that's displayed is not only song to song. Like, you'll get songs like Pink City, which are very loud and bombastic, and then songs like Fast Car, which are just super reserved and subtle. Like, you'll go through those two tones and sounds and different levels of harshness and reservedness within one song. You have songs like Apostat Commander and Blacks, which start out and they're very subtle and low-key, and then all of a sudden explode in these harsh shrieks, and then you kind of come back down. But the thing about this album is that even when it is down in reserve, you can always tell there's just something bubbling beneath the surface, and when it's unleashed, it's always just so powerful. Like on Sad Reduxographer, where you just get that moment where the entire song is very low and reserved, and Jamie is just solemnly singing about this person that he loves, who he can clearly tell will never love him back. And then just at the end, when his voice just says, "He said it did not cost me anything," but obviously I'm not doing that justice. He actually explodes with that, and he goes from this really reserved delivery, and then that part is just super loud and chaotic, and it just absolutely fills you with everything he's trying to convey to you there. You just feel his pain. It just exudes off that one little explosive moment of him just raising his voice to the most pained level possible. So when you're entering this album, it really is a journey from start to finish, just through the mind of someone who at this point in his life is just completely broken, is just right on the edge of completely losing faith in everything and just going insane. And not insane in the sense that, he's about to be like a psychopath serial killer or anything. It's just not being able to deal with the realities of his life anymore. He's really just on that place. His mental health has been pushed to the absolute edge, and he just doesn't know what he's going to do in a lot of aspects of his life. Dealing with the death of his father, it is just insanely hard for him. Dealing with his own, suicidal struggles at times, dealing with his love life, as I already mentioned, all of it is just weighing on him so hard to the point where life is pretty much unbearable at that point for him. So, I mean, if you're someone who's never heard a Xiu Xiu album before, a lot of their projects, including especially this one, have a very particular appeal where it's not like you're going in there just for some nice, easy breezy enjoyment. They definitely have projects like Forget, where even if the lyrical content on a lot of those songs is very serious, at least the songs, are fairly catchy and upbeat a lot of the times, and you can easily kind of grab onto what's happening there just on a first listen. But this is one where, really, you're going in, and it's completely devastating. It's just bleak, it's hopeless, and it's not, if you're trying to get enjoyment out of music per se, this isn't really that. This is more so if you're someone who just wants to have just someone like Jamie Stewart who can just evoke the most poignant emotions possible about the most serious topics in the world. It's a very particular appeal, and I totally understand if someone doesn't like this. It is a hard to listen to project at times, but to me it is just so endearing and potent that I just love music like this, that just can get so much out of me, that is just so effective in what it's going for, that it's just such a powerful experience every time I hear it. And that's really what I go for, just to have all these emotions just pulled out of me. So yeah, that is my ranking of Xiu Xiu's 14 studio albums. This was such a fun discography to really explore, because a lot of these projects, not only are they great on their own, but just how they build off each other, just in the grand scheme of Xiu Xiu as an artist, and really Jamie in particular, just seeing his character, how he builds that up throughout all these projects, how they'll play off each other. It really just strengthens everything as a whole. And because all these projects are so sonically and musically diverse, it's really fantastic just to go through and explore everything these guys have to offer. So yeah, this video was a ton of fun for me to make. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I'd be super curious to see your guys' rankings, because Xiu Xiu, like, they're not an artist that you usually see people discuss rankings of. You know, it's always Kanye West, Radiohead, Bjork. You know, it's people like that you constantly see people ranking their work and just seeing where everything would line up. But with Xiu Xiu, like, don't think I've ever seen like much discussion about that. So I'd be very curious to see how these albums line up for other people. Like, I have no idea if my ranking is something that's like traditional or if it's one that's, you know, going to be super unorthodox. I know my placement of like Knife Play really low is going to be weird, but other than that, like, I'm really curious to see how would these albums stack up for everyone else. I know A Promise as a favorite pick is also another more traditional pick, but yeah. So thank you guys as always for watching, and I'll see you next time.